Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta, and you're watching Basis Points, where we dive deep into the numbers and the stories that drive our economy and shape our world. The headlines. The Philippine Economic Zone Authority is on track to meet its target of 200 billion pesos in investment pledges for the year. A consumer group asks a court to nullify certain provisions of the NAIA Public-Private Partnership Project Concession Agreement. We'll talk to the spokesperson of the Manila International Airport Authority later on in the show. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas expects to conclude its probe into unauthorized deductions from GCash by the second week of December. And Bitcoin hits an all-time high of $94,000. First, a look at the financial markets. On Wall Street, the tech-heavy Nasdaq closes lower as investors digest weak results from Target while awaiting earnings from mega-cap NVIDIA. Growth stocks like Tesla and Amazon fall. The Dow Jones ticks up late in the session while the S&P 500 remains unchanged.
One retailer had really strong numbers. And another retailer had very poor numbers and poor guidance. And so I think that that's confusing the picture a little bit. Then on top of that, obviously, the market is, I think, in general, trying to consolidate a lot of not only post-election gains, but also just gains for the year, right? We've had a huge year-to-date number in U.S. markets. And so some of this, I think, is just excessive positive sentiment trying to work itself off, particularly ahead of a pretty big tech company reporting tonight.
Over in Europe, stocks decline as traders monitor a spike in tensions between Russia and Ukraine. France's CAC 40 falls the most, down 0.4%. Here in the Asia-Pacific, markets are trading mixed, with Japan's Nikkei 225 falling 0.7%, and the KOSPI and the S&P ASX index are up in early trade. Over in the commodities market, oil prices are up, trading at $73 a barrel, while gold is at more than $2,600 per troy ounce. Now, the Philippine Economic Zone Authority says it's on track to meet its target of 200 billion pesos in investment pledges for the year. This comes as investment approvals have already reached 186 billion pesos, surpassing the total recorded for the entire year of 2023. That was at 175 billion pesos. This also represents a 32% increase compared to the 141 billion pesos in investment pledges in the same period last year. Now, the significant growth reflects strong business confidence and the attractiveness of the country's economic zones for both domestic and foreign investors. The PEZA board has approved 222 new and expansion projects from January 1 to November 13th. These projects are expected to generate 60,000 direct jobs and produce over $3 billion in exports, further strengthening the economy and creating opportunities for the Filipino workforce. Now, vehicle sales rise in October. That's according to data from the Chamber of Automotive Manufacturers of the Philippines and the Truck Manufacturers Association. Car sales increased by 8.9%, topping 384,000. Light commercial vehicles held the largest share at 73%. In terms of companies, Toyota Motor Philippines ranked first, followed by Mitsubishi. 12 firms, on the other hand, reported a drop in sales. Now, the overall rise in vehicle sales signals growing consumer confidence and economic stability. On another front, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas expects to conclude its probe into unauthorized deductions from GCash by the second week of December. Apart from identifying the root cause of the issue, the BSP says it's also assessing potential vulnerabilities in the mobile wallet operator system. The central bank is also reviewing the company's compliance with regulatory standards. GCash attributes the recent deductions to a system error, particularly in its Send Ang Pao service. This investigation is crucial for maintaining trust in the country's digital payment system and ensures that users' funds remain secure. Now, the Bitcoin surge continues as the world's biggest cryptocurrency touches $94,000 for the first time. This follows reports that Donald Trump's social media company is in talks to buy crypto trading firm Bakkt. The prospect adds to hopes of a less restrictive regime for digital assets under the incoming Trump administration. Cryptocurrencies have soared since the November 5th elections, with the global market value topping a record high of $3 trillion. The Bitcoin rally reflects renewed confidence in the crypto market, fueled by expectations of a friendlier regulatory environment. Now, this could spur even more investments and growth in the cryptocurrency sector, signaling a shift towards mainstream acceptance of the digital assets. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line.
In a time when nature's new norm includes earthquakes and storms of unimagined intensities, a visit to two important colonial heritage sites shows us just how much work has to be done to build a database and map the sites that should never, ever be just a memory. If ever these structures are to be fully and truthfully restored, we must look to both past and present expertise to maintain the integrity of these sources of Dayao, our knowledge, our pride.
From Manila to the globe, this is World News Feed, bringing you the biggest stories shaping our time. Let's dive into the headlines making a global impact.
Welcome back to Basis Points Trading at the Philippine Stock Exchange. Opened just a few minutes ago. Let's take a look at the initial figures. Now, right now at 9:39 this morning, we're seeing a bloodbath at the PSE index. Everything is in the red, and sharply in the red at that, which is going the opposite direction from yesterday's performance, where the PSE index was up 2.5%, marking its biggest gain since February 2023. This was recovering from a sell-off sparked by Trump's win, and we had experienced 4 days of sell-offs 4 days of gains prior to today's mega losses. Right now, the PSE index is down by 1.7%, nearly erasing yesterday's 2.5% rise. Now we're at 68.57. All the sub-indices are in the green. All shares index down 1% to 38.08. The financials down 1.4%. Industrial counter down 1.5%. Holding firms down the most, down by 2.5%, a little over 2.5%. Services counter down by 0.3%. Mining and oil counter down by 0.7%, and the property counter is down by 1.1%. Now, at the foreign exchange market, the peso opened slightly weaker against the dollar. It opened at 58.93 compared to its previous close of 58.91. Now, in other news, Valenzuela City is ordered to refund 3.8 million pesos to NLEX, or the North Luzon Expressway Corporation, in local business taxes. The Court of Tax Appeals rules that the taxes levied for signage services between 2012 and 2019 were unjustified. The court says that no valid business tax should have been applied, as NLEX's signages in Valenzuela were not part of a sales outlet or warehouse. The CTA notes that NLEX offices in the city serve only as display areas, with no inventory stored or business conducted, and therefore failed to meet the criteria for a taxable sales office or branch. This ruling highlights the importance of clear tax guidelines and fair practices. Now, joining us on the line is NAIA spokesperson, attorney Chris Bendijo. He's going to be talking to us about the things going on with MIA right now. Chris, hi.
Good morning, Ms. Maiki.
Okay, Chris, a lot of things going on with the Manila International Airport Authority, one of which just yesterday, a petition was filed against you guys by a consumer group, depending on how it was sent. I don't suppose you have a copy of that yet, do you, Chris?
Well, we haven't formally received a copy of the petition, and it would be improper for us to comment on the matter. In fact, it would be improper for us to comment at all, since it's pending before the court. But of course, we respect the right to seek judicial relief and remedies. We, however, maintain that the entire process, from the bidding all the way to the concession agreement and even the AO1 rates, the process was very transparent and in accordance with law.
Okay, absolutely. So let's talk in broad strokes. I think the big picture here revolves around balancing privatization, public interest, and legal accountability. In a nutshell, the consumer groups fear that privatization might not will prioritize profit rather than the public's interest. How do you ensure, when doing what you do, how do you ensure that you strike a balance between the two?
Well, first, the concession agreement would still be the best evidence that this is not the case. Contained in that concession agreement would be the key performance indicators, the obligations of NNIC, which we're supposed to regulate, including mandatory, civil, and CAAP works that would cover infrastructure, introduction of technology, which is all of these are geared towards what I personally take as two most important KPIs. Number one, the increase of passenger terminal capacity from 30 million to 60, and two, increase of aircraft movement per hour from 40 to 48. Now, of course, all actions done by NNIC are geared towards this, and as new regulator, MIA will have to ensure that all of their actions will be compliant with the key performance indicators in the concession agreement.
Okay, stepping back a bit, the Manila International Airport Authority handed over the operations and maintenance of the Ninoy Aquino International Airport to the winning bidder, SMC's new NAIA Infrastructure Corp, or NNIC, on September 14th. With this transition, how now does MIA fit into the new operational structure? I understand it's a bit of a tripartite agreement. Can you elaborate on this, Attorney Chris?
That's right. MIA will be the regulator. Operations and maintenance of the terminals will be the obligation of NNIC. And there will be an independent consultant who will sit as the third party to arbitrate between the two. Now, as regulator, the concession agreement enumerates key performance indicators which NNIC is supposed to comply with and the timelines for the same. And the role of MIA as regulator is to ensure that all their actions are geared towards satisfying and complying all the key performance indicators.
Talk to us about the complexity of what you're doing, the overhaul of NAIA. Now, speaking of, to put things into perspective, you're not building from the ground up. You are overhauling an existing airport that's still functioning, that still needs to be functioning all throughout it all. And it's our main gateway at that. Can you talk to us about the complexities? How complex and how challenging is this endeavor?
You got it on point. No? I think that's one of the biggest challenges both NNIC and MIA would be facing, because we all know how substantial the needed improvements. And you correctly pointed it out. We are doing this on what we call a live airport, or what they call a brownfield airport. Operations should still continue. The commitment of NNIC is to introduce all of these without having a substantial disruption on the operations. And I tell you, that's a big challenge. For instance, if you want to improve the air conditioning, you cannot just simply turn it off. You cannot just simply close the airport to introduce the infrastructure or the technology, because it is operating. So this has to be really executed carefully and with precision.
What's the total investment cost of this overhaul, Chris?
The concession agreement covers a 170 billion investment on the part of NNIC.
Okay. There's a lot of complaints about how much money is going to be going to this, and how consumers are going to have to recoup this. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but what comes to mind is the Skyway, and how initially when that came to fore, a lot of people were complaining about the high costs of the toll fees. But when it actually happened, there was the efficiency, the increased efficiency, and the convenience that it brought. How do you think this situation is going to fare out in the long run? Do you think it's going to be similar similar to what happened with the Skyway project. A lot of heeing and hawing at first, but then eventually when they see the improvements, that's when people acknowledge the need for it and are more accepting. What do you think about this, Attorney Chris?
Well, I totally agree with what you pointed out. Really, change is very difficult in the beginning. And just to give you an idea, our terminals are designed, their original design is just for a 30 million capacity. At present, we're hitting 40 million already. So that tells us how much we have to catch up with, how much improvements we need to introduce to attain that convenience level. And at this point, what I can say is that we're on the right path. Remember that NNIC, they're partnered with Incheon Airport, and it's one of the best airports in the world. So I think we just need a little more patience, a little more understanding from our stakeholders, from our passengers. In due time, maybe early quarter next year, we can already feel some of the changes that will be introduced.
Now, under the agreement, NNIC is to remit 82.16% of its gross revenues to the national government, excluding terminal fees. How significant is this commitment, and what impact do you see it having on both government revenues and airport operations?
For one, it actually shows the commitment of NNIC that their objective really here is the improvement and overhaul of the airport and not revenue. It also assures the government of revenues while NNIC is operating the terminals, because we have to put it on record. For instance, NNIC had already shelled out 30 billion upfront payment for the concession agreement. They've already paid also above 1.5 billion for the prorated 2 billion annuity, which is guaranteed for 2024. And they've also remitted 82.16% of gross revenues, excluding PSC, for this quarter of 2024. So clearly, it's not a revenue-based operation on the part of NNIC. Rather, I think geared towards the vision of RSA himself, is that really to remove NAIA from being branded as the worst airport in the world. So I think that revenue sharing proposed by NNIC shows a different perspective insofar as running the terminals is concerned.
Well, from the worst airport in the world, things can only get better from here. Chris, in terms of improvements, can you give us an update on the latest developments within MIA? When are we going to start feeling the first round of benefits following the transition? And how specifically will these improvements translate to boosts in two key issues, passenger capacity and air traffic movements?
That's right. Insofar as projects pending and completed are concerned, what I can report on is one, the OFW lounge, which is already completed in Terminal 3. It's already being enjoyed by our modern day heroes. And if that's a taste of the improvement that is to come, then it's a very good start. The next would be, adjacent to that, would be expansion of immigration counters, final security check at Terminal 3, which will cater to our OFWs, senior citizens, PWDs, and other passengers with reduced mobility. We've already boarded up our new area for greeters and well-wishers in Terminal 3. If you've been around our terminals, you'll notice road widening, and I'm made aware that a specific exit, another exit will be introduced by Skyway that will lead to Terminal 3. So there will be no more crisscrossing of vehicular traffic in front of Resorts World. We have procurement of additional technology, X-ray, scanning machines, PVDs, your automated visual docking system. It's quite a long list, Ms. Maiki. I don't know if we have enough time.
Yeah, all right.
I think we have enough that will be felt for the first quarter or next quarter of next year.
Okay. One last question before I let you go, Chris. When will this overhaul be finished, realistically and optimistically speaking?
In terms of timeline, assuming that we do not encounter any legal obstacles, I think in a matter of 5 to 8 years, we'll be able to see the overhaul of the terminal. That includes even the creation of a new terminal where Philippine Village Hotel is. Part of the obligation of NNIC is to demolish this and establish a new terminal that will be connected to Terminal 2. So if you can imagine, this will be creating a mega terminal that will be additional parking base for our aircraft. And then, of course, as we've mentioned, the intention really is to increase passenger terminal capacity. So if you can imagine how much more gates this will create, how much more commercial real estate this will create, And again, this will really generate better economic activity insofar as the Philippines is concerned.
Okay, thank you for those updates on everything going on with NAIA, Attorney Chris.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good morning.
That was Attorney Chris Bendijo, spokesperson for the Manila International Airport Authority. Now, before we go, the weekend continues to drive a tourism boom in Japan, with a number of visitors reaching a record high last month. Japan welcomed 3.31 million tourists in October, up from 2.87 million in September, and exceeding the previous monthly record of 3.29 million set in July. The country's famous autumn leaf colors also contributed to the increased tourism demand. Through October, about 30.2 million people visited Japan, just shy of the annual record of 31.9 million set in 2019. Now, before the COVID pandemic shut global borders. This rising tourism in Japan reflects the global economic impact of exchange rate fluctuations, where a weak yen makes the country more affordable for international travelers. And that's it for Basis Points. I'm Maiki Oreta. We'll be back tomorrow for more news on the financial markets and more. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo news channel, always on top.